Greetings sailors and welcome to a Patreon supporter spotlight featuring the Hood, which isn't all that common a sight, I don't think. Now this is Pirate Skenya and this is actually from before the patch. I recorded this at the point more or less where I got it, and then the footage has just been kind of sat on my drive very usefully, so I'm now getting around to actually doing a video on it, and I think I've got either one or two more that are similar as well, because alas, unlike the previous patch where it would play the replays of the patch before that, now we're in 10.0 I can't play the, what was it, 9.12 replays. So yeah, it was a good thing I actually did record this, because it's going to be kind of an interesting game for the Hood. It's definitely going to be a much better than average game than one would see in the Hood. Now, I'm not sure why Pirate Skenya was pink in this one. I have a feeling they might have explained it in the attached email, and I've just forgotten. But either way, they are pink, and, you know, it happens sometimes, even purely by accident. A stray torpedo catches somebody, or a shell clips somebody that you're next to, and hey presto, you're pink. Although in the case of a shell clipping somebody, it's got to clip them for quite a lot of damage at that point. The Hood itself, long-time viewers will know, is not my favourite ship. It's pretty decently survivable and it is nice and fast, but the performance of these 15-inch guns is not great, and it's not great on really any of the ships that they are found on, apart from perhaps the Warspite at tier 6. Queen Elizabeth does okay with them as well, also being a tier 6, but when you get to tier 7 with the Hood, they start to feel a bit lackluster, especially against tier 9s. And this is one of the reasons why this is going to be a good game, is because he's top tier, so he doesn't have many of those bigger, nastier guns to worry about. There is an enemy Sinop with, what, 16-inch guns? But I think that's by far the worst of it. And then, of course, you have the Monarch and Vanguard with these same 15-inch guns at tier 8, at which point they really do not feel particularly good at all. Certainly not against tier 10s, and you can't even fall back on having a good high explosive performance as with many of the other British battleship calibers. For some reason the 15-inch shells are far more average. They are far more by way of, like, for instance, the German 15-inch shells in terms of their HE. So yeah, if you see someone in the Monarch firing lots of HE, it's not nearly as worrying as someone in a King George V firing lots of HE. That's a far more potent ship with that ammo. So a big old chunky hit on that weirdly broadside reversing Miyoko. Not the kill, sadly, but he has got one already, and a pretty decent chunk of damage. Is certainly going to get more than that, of course, but I have to say, you know, compared to my average, this is probably about half the average damage I do in the Hood, because it's one of those ships where it's kind of a weirdly narrow specific range of damage that my matches always seem to fall into. It's usually between 70 and 80k damage. So it's weirdly reliable in that sense, but it means I've not really had any truly fun, good high damage games with it. It probably goes much the same for the Monarch as well, but I guess I've just paid much less attention to the average damage of that ship when I've been playing it. Not that I do play it for fun, really. So they've taken this cap quite handily. Over on the other side, I mean, that looks like there was a majority of enemy ships compared to allied ships, so we've lost a couple of ships over there and they've taken the cap, and we've just got now a pair of tier 5 battleships trying to make their way away from the cap. There's a few more enemy ships on this side compared to those two, but yeah, there's not really anything they particularly have to worry about. I mean, the Ashitaka has also got big guns. I mean, I was talking about the Sinop, but obviously the Ashitaka's got 16-inch guns as well, but that is rather less tough than the Sinop to deal with in terms of its armour layout. If you get a full blast of those 16-inch guns, of course, it's unpleasant, but it's just a rather squashy ship in comparison. Viribus Unitas is definitely a squashy ship, not least because of its rather low health. And there we go, nice 10k chunk out of them. And if that wasn't a Viribus Unitas or some other relatively squashy tier 5 battleship, that would probably not have happened. These guns do not perform that reliably generally. But in this case, you know, top tier for 15-inch guns, so it does still count for something. There's enough ships here, obviously, to just keep pushing through. They know where all of the enemy team is at this point, so Pirate can afford to be pretty aggressive. He doesn't really have to worry about torpedoes, as we know where the one destroyer is over on the other side, and really that just leaves, you know, aerial attacks maybe to be concerned about, but he's in a blob of ships here. Of course, he's also got the defensive, which we've seen him use, but on this ship the defensive truly is a gimmick. As far as I know, it still only affects the innermost unrotated projectile portion of your AA, and those get knocked out really, really easily. They might have buffed that at some point. It might affect more AA guns than just those, but if that change has been made, then it's not one that I've noticed. So it's really just the Ashitaka to deal with, and then they can sweep across and do stuff on the other side. Kenya's really not taken much damage. I mean, he's been with... In fact, has he taken any damage at this point? No, I don't think he has. He's been with enough allies that he's just not been shot at, which sometimes can happen if you're in a big blob and they just choose not to shoot at you. But yeah, it's chance, really, that it comes down to in those circumstances. You never know if it's going to specifically be you or not that gets aimed at. And as he is now, I think, the only person that Ashitaka can shoot at, certainly the closest, they're having a go, but they don't really manage to land any particular kind of hit there. He did himself manage a big chunky 12k before that killing blow, so another good hit, and kind of demonstrates what I was saying about Ashitaka's armour as well. And all that really leaves in the immediate vicinity is the enemy carrier, who must be getting a bit panicked by now. This has been not a particularly tough match as far as this flank is concerned, but they still have lost a couple of ships pretty much overall on the other side, I think. So yeah, it's not like this is going to be a raffle stomp game, but I think you can already see it's not shaping up to be some kind of skin of the teeth game as far as Pirate is concerned, just because of the lack of damage he's had to take, and just being with all of these allies, and the fact they've swept up this lesser part of the enemy team on this flank, and it's all just kind of worked out nicely for him. But these are the kind of circumstances that you can't really manufacture. This is just kind of sheer luck at this point. That's not to denigrate his shooting, though. His shooting has been on point, and the guns have actually been behaving reasonably well for the Hood. So all of this bodes well for coming into really the second part of this match, which is dealing with what's left of the enemy team on the other flank, which is now just down to 4 ships. There's really not a lot left of them. And he's got a huge amount of hit points. He's not had to use any heals or anything, so he can be very bullish here. I mean, the Scharnhorst has been really taking the lead here, taking advantage of being top tier, and they've lost far more health because they've then, I guess, taken the focus. So, I mean, when he did that swing round south initially, that maybe he didn't have to. He maybe could have been more up front from the beginning and more alongside this Scharnhorst, but you can understand him taking it a bit cautiously when he didn't necessarily know what his teammates were going to do. And of course, by the time he did, it takes a moment or two to swing your battleship around and chunter back over towards them. And it really is his good turn of speed. He's obviously using the Sierra Mike flag here to get 33 knots. That's let him kind of catch up and easily keep pace and not get left behind. Which is, I mean, tier 7 is kind of the tier where everything's at last reasonably speedy, apart from a few outliers like the California and the Colorado. Everything else has, I mean, what's the slowest next to that? Nagato, which is like, what, 25 knots? Something like that. So, I mean, it's still not fast, but there's far more ships that are around that kind of 20-21 knot range at tier 6. So tier 7 is I think a pretty good tier for battleships overall in terms of picking up a lot of flexibility. So one of the enemies left is that Sinop, who really didn't seem to have taken a lot of damage on that flank themselves. There's also a cruiser left, whatever that is. I can't quite see from the icon. I'm not recognising it. It's a US cruiser and their destroyer. They're down to not that many ships themselves, but considering the balance of forces here, I mean, I don't think the enemy team is going to win this unless Pirotskenia and this Piotr Wielki and the Scharnhorst, like, they all get detonated or something. I mean, it could happen, but it's unlikely. So there's the enemy Akatsuki, extremely low health, and if he gets lucky, there we go, it actually manages to ninja that kill for a Kraken Unleashed. But in terms of damage, you can't say he hasn't worked for it. He's up to now over 100,000. And I think I've maybe managed that in the Hood like once or twice, maybe? Maybe? And it must have been a damage farming enough game that I never bothered to show it on the channel. However, this has definitely not been just, you know, farming damage from AFK enemies or whatever. Pirotskenia has definitely been doing some work here. It's just nobody's particularly shot at him. Some games it just works out like that. So a pretty solid hit, a very solid hit on the Sinop there, and then they weren't angled well at all, but I swear when I'm making those kind of shots, it's like, you know, half of them miss and the 3/4 of what's left either shatter or bounce, and you get like, yeah, oh okay, an overpen, yay. But in that case, no, that was a good 17k damage. So although being at this range to the Sinop ordinarily in most other tier 7 battleships is kind of an unsettling prospect. Oh, there we go. What was that? A New Orleans. Okay, I was right, it was a US cruiser. Just because, you know, 16-inch guns and that Russian battleship curve means they can punch through and do nasty amounts of damage, but he's got so much health, and this is the last ship that Pirotskenia really doesn't need to, you know, worry about that. He could even, if he felt so inclined, go for the ram here. I'm pretty sure it will be faster than the Sinop, right? The Sinop doesn't break 30 knots, does it? I can't remember. I don't think it does. But instead, he declines to get in close enough and give the Sinop the opportunity to get his full amount of hit points back as damage. And so the Sinop is going to get some shots on him, and it is going to hurt, but it's also, you know, they're not going to last too much longer themselves because everybody's now firing at this Sinop. I say everybody, it's basically him, the Piotr Wielki, and the carrier that are now gunning for this guy. So shots out, the Sinop's just been struggling to get their guns round, and there we go, and ooh, that hurt, that definitely hurt, but they do not have a lot of hit points left now themselves, and sadly he's denied a 7th kill. A 7th kill would have been very spicy for the Hood indeed, but as it was, you know, still 6 kills. That's still half the enemy team he finished off, and alongside that he also got a Confederate and a high caliber and over 2,000 base XP. So, you know, that's probably about as good as it gets in the Hood, unless you get some extremely exceptional RNG and, you know, even better circumstances than that somehow. As to how the Hood would perform post-Captain rework, I mean, I'm still getting my head around that to some extent. Yeah, I don't know. There's always Deadeye, I suppose. Now that we're at the end of this video, though, it's probably a really bad time to talk about that, so I'll save that for some other replay. In fact, I've got a Venezia game I had just today, which is like the first good game I've had in about a week that wasn't a ruffle stomp or just meh or blighted by battleships all hanging around at the back or carriers or whatever else. That felt like way too long of a list. But anyway, yeah, so I'll talk about it a bit more in the context of a replay that's actually from the relevant patch. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath it. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more.